So the concept that I was drawn to in this week's reading, or talking about strategic thinking, was like an intellectual action, which when I was reading like the key elements, the one that stood out to me as being kind of more relevant to the concept of like intellectual action, was like the key idea number 3, which is like routinely assessing a thought, which I at first had a hard time thinking about what part of my personal or professional life I could attribute that concept to, not in like with any sort of hubris or anything, but I feel like I'm a relatively collected person, and I could make fairly reasonable decisions most of the time. Obviously there's moments, eating a large slice of cake or something when you shouldn't, but I stepped back more and less having to do with like my capstone paper, so I apologize if this particular reading was supposed to be more specific towards our capstones, but I'm going a little more on the personal side and just thinking about strategic thinking and how I have already utilized it, maybe without knowing, but I think, so I'll give like a personal example, and thinking about like the elements of the intellectual action component. I quit drinking at the beginning of the year, and when I originally had started not drinking, it was kind of like a beginning of the year, like, let's just start over, like, and I, picked up a couple of books to read to kind of like motivate myself not to drink during this time, but these books actually kind of stuck with me and made me feel like the decision to quit drinking should be a little more permanent. So I was thinking about that and what aspect of that. So the idea is like, why do I get pulled away from that? What makes me want to give up? So the first question is like, what's actually going on in the situation? And so I said, like, I have feelings of shame that I don't want to like let go and just enjoy life like other people, because that's definitely like one of the things that a lot of my friends say, which is like, well, you don't have a drinking problem, so like just have like 1 or 2 drinks and hang out with us. And it's this like, as like a almost 37-year-old woman, I feel myself being drawn to like, folding under that peer pressure, which is like irrational. I mean, I don't fall under peer pressure for anything else. Like, it's just such a huge part of our social and cultural construct, drinking, that people are really bummed out that I don't want to do it. And so that's kind of what's really going on. And then number 2 was like, what are your options for the situation, which is to go back to drinking or to stay the course and just keep not drinking. And the next one was a justifiable rationale to continue or to like uphold that option that I choose, which for me is to stay the course. And I said that my justification is that I know drinking now would just be a societal pressure, that I don't have an interest in drinking because I recognize now how sobriety has been better for me. And then the last part of this intellectual action component is like ways of reasoning with yourself, using intellectual standards, using strategic thinking. And for me, it was like rereading those books that motivated me to continue on my path. Thinking about all these mornings that I get up at like 5 and go work out now, instead of like having hangovers, even if it's slight. I mean, the older we get, it's like 3 beers and you're like the next day. And then like showing my daughters the kind of restrict, like I said, we live in a culture of drinking. It's so commonplace. Like I grew up, my family drinking wine at every event. And I think it would be kind of nice for them to have they just have somebody who doesn't, and like to see that, like, even if they're surrounded by other people drinking. And so I gave this example because the one that really stuck out to me, like I said, was like the key idea number 3, which is just to like routinely assess your intellectual thinking. Because I think I think sometimes where we stop to think is like this weekend thought of like it would be so much easier to just not follow this path. And in this case, that's like the drinking, but in general, like it would be easier to just not have to think about recycling. It would be easier to not have to do, like clean my house every day, even though I made a list of reasons. Like, so routinely assessing, like, why did I implement this change or this, like, decision? I thought that was interesting.